when you find supportive relationships, everyone should be winning. It should be flourishing. It should be abundant, and should bring up your energy, right? There should be a sense of we're both uplifted from the connection. And if you're bringing yourself down or one person down, like it's not in service to everyone. You're making something that's a non-supportive system. Welcome to Psychedelic Source, where wisdom meets practice in the evolving landscape of psychedelic medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Sandra Dreisbach, and I'm here to help you navigate the complex intersection of ethics, business, and personal growth in a psychedelic space. Whether you're a practitioner, therapist, entrepreneur, or simply curious about this transformative field, you've found your source for authentic dialogue, practical resources, and community connection. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the stories, strategies, and ethical considerations that matter most to our growing ecosystem. Let's tap in to our inner source of wisdom and explore what it means to build a sustainable and ethical psychedelic future together.
The information shared on this podcast, our website, and other platforms may be triggering for some viewers and readers and is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. While we explore topics related to altered states of consciousness, we do not endorse or encourage illegal activities or substance use. Always research your local laws and consult qualified professionals for guidance. The content provided is, as is, and we are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared. Stay supported and informed, act responsibly, and enjoy the podcast.
On this episode of the Psychedelic Source, it is my honor and privilege to have Jason Croft. And Jason Croft, if you may not know, he is my video editor and also helped to co-create the original episodes and some of the thought and the reflection around what Psychedelic Source is today. And his creativity, his heart, his talent is so key to this show. One of the things I love about him as a person is, first of all, we just have a good time talking, and you'll hear about this in this episode. But also the fact that he's a voice who doesn't have that background in psychedelics and plant medicines. And I've, in the editing process, he makes the main editing calls and including like the clips that are chosen to feature. I really love the fact, since we're trying to, here in Psychedelic Source, bridge between worlds and communities and help people understand from different perspectives the fact that Jason comes from this not coming from this psychedelic background, but still has a lot of things that I feel are so essential about really coming into higher integrity with psychedelics and plant medicine, which to me includes being in relationship with nature, being able to capture it, to be able to speak to it. And as they say, a picture speaks 1,000 words. And in that, he is quite proficient. So I'll leave that there, let the episode primarily speak for itself and in our conversation. But this is another behind the scenes sort of episode for transparency, but also to just uplift another, unsung hero, where none of us does anything by ourselves. We do it in collaboration, we do it in community, and let's all lift each other up. Enjoy the episode. Well, I cannot tell you how excited I am today to welcome Jason Croft to Psychedelic Source. And if we're really going to talk about sourcing, the Psychedelic Source, this is literally the source. It's Jason and I, the Psychedelic Source in a lot of ways. And I know I've already done an intro at the beginning, but Jason, maybe you want to talk a little bit about who you are and your work before we get into the nit and gritty about our working relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here and jump in on this. So fun. Glad you had me on, and happy to talk. Happy to talk about myself anytime.
Yeah, and you can hear everyone. Doesn't he have an amazing radio voice? And by the way, he has his own podcast.
That's right. Several of them. Because I need to hear the sound of my own voice as much as possible. Yeah,
Yes, clearly. Yeah, that's why anyone goes into podcasting, right? It's all about hearing our own voice.
that's right.
But
Yeah, I don't need an audience. I just need to listen as I go to sleep each night and just listening to the sound of my own voice. Uh, so yeah, I've been in the media side of things from video, film, movies, events, podcasting, of course, for 33 years now.
wow.
Doing all that. So that's been a through line for sure. Jumped in front of the camera to do the podcasting thing about 10 years ago now for the first time. And that just lit something up for me. I think it was the combination of maybe putting myself out there a little bit and things like that, but mostly it was doing this right here, like we're doing today, and
Connecting and chatting and talking.
and pulling people's stories out. And I did it as a marketing initiative for the production company I was working for at the time. And wow, that worked, but also it just turned a switch on for me. And I've done some kind of show ever since and have an absolute blast doing that. And now helping clients do that for themselves and really taking it. And I'm sure we'll get into some of that too as we started Psychedelic Source, for you, that it goes so far beyond just, okay, here's a podcast, check. We go a lot deeper, and that's the fun part of this as well, is really making it valuable from a business perspective and connection and perspective and all of that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And as everyone can see, probably from the background, you can literally see strategy in action. And I remember when I had my first meeting with you and seeing that it wasn't just about, literally not just about talking the talk, it's about walking the walk and actually having real action. I mean, I'm sure it's probably meant more in a media sense, but still like that pragmatics aspect. And I really appreciate that about you, that already told me that you as a person, in terms of your character, really showed up, not just in ideas, but in practice.
Thank you.
You're welcome. No, it's very true. But maybe you could speak a little bit more about your background, about, I remember you telling me a little bit about doing wildlife, animal footage and filmmaking. Can you talk a little bit about, your work in filmmaking?
Yeah, on both of those things. So the wildlife, the animal stuff, there was a period of a few years there doing a lot of those projects, just the most fun I think I've ever had. Um, Started with this reality show pilot. So I was still back in Texas, and this wildlife place called Snake Farm, going through there, being in the cages, being with the animals, all these exotic animals and stuff. And then another half of that shoot was in a place called Sharkarosa. Scott, amazing guy, owns that. And then being there with his bears and all kinds of
Wow.
crazy animals. And we shot a movie there. He and I went to Alaska together. We were chasing bears, running through the forest there. So there's just a lot of fun. There's just something about that too. I mean, I talked about that, a switch being on. That was another big one for me, just being around all the animals and stuff like that. That was a lot of fun. And yeah, the movie side of things, I mean, that was a passion for me from high school and being in little small town Texas, not having a clue. Like, I just had this pull. I wanted to make movies. So I'm going through the phone book my senior year, like looking at video production companies, right? And like totally different, insanely opposite ends of the spectrum world, but I don't know. So I was just going through there, and I ended up getting an internship there with a production company I worked for 5 years. And that just led into a whole career. So it was kind of parallel careers, and went to college and happened to, fall into this little school that had this actual real amazing filmmaker named Andy Anderson, who sold a movie to Universal, had really done the stuff. And so I had these parallel tracks of filmmaking and kind of the corporate video and event side going for several years. And then, again, I keep referencing sort of the passion and the switch. Well, that switch for filmmaking just went off around
Yeah.
2010 or so. For some reason, it was really strange. And so there was kind of this moment of like, what do I do now? Like my entire world has been this. And what filled that a lot was business and specifically marketing. There was just this pull towards that, and that sort of filled that. And so now kind of bringing everything together a little bit, certainly the media and video side of things, podcast, the connection, storytelling, but really this passion for connection and
Connecting. No,
I don't
I
know, there's
mean,
just something about it.
no, and I love that because, like, whether it's and connecting through a medium, right? Even though you're connecting with the animals and being out in the wilds of Alaska, right? You're using a medium, or whether you're connecting with people through marketing, right? The marketing is supported through the mediums that you're creating and co-creating. So I love that. Different kind of wild animal, I guess, to be on the internet.
Yeah.
But I'm also curious, like, because I mean, even though I haven't seen you interact with animals and nature, but like, I think another thing that really drew me to you versus someone else to work with is this sense of connection with nature. And obviously you enjoyed doing your work with when you were doing the filmmaking in the wilds, as it were, as well as with the cages and the different. So I guess was it like a zoo? Was it more of like a preserve of some sort, in Texas? But I'm curious about, like, where did your origins come from? What's the source for you in terms of relationship to nature or to plants and animals?
I don't know. Honestly, I mean, I grew up. We had space. We lived on an acre. Had pets and things like that, and so it was always outside. Definitely that generation. That's like, you go outside and
Go
play.
outside and play.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, so that was always there. But there was I've had this pull for the mountains specifically. That's why I'm in Colorado now. I tell people all the time I'm an obnoxious Texan still in my soul, but
I don't know. I
these
mean,
these mountains, I needed them big time. I took when I was still in college, I took three of my good friends had all moved out here, different
to
areas of Colorado.
Colorado.
So one summer I took a road trip around and made that tour, and ever since I was just like, I gotta get there. Like, there's just something. I mean, and being in Alaska, of course, I
Alaska's
got to go to
gorgeous.
Zurich.
Gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous.
Yeah, going to Zurich. There were some mountains there. In
Switzerland,
Banff,
yeah.
the Banff in Canada, that was the most pull towards mountains like I've ever seen. There's just something to that. I think it's like a Beatles and Elvis thing. You're either more mountains or more ocean as far as your like love, and for me it's mountains. It's just
Oh, no, we can have
there's
a
just some
discussion.
kind of
No,
pull.
but I would have probably identified for a long time as being more ocean, but obviously I live on the Santa Cruz Mountains, but it's not like a white-capped mountain,
Yeah.
like like, um, but really, like, being in relationship and especially if I think about some, traditional medicines and traditions, and the relationship with the spirit of the mountain, uh, and how, or like how apus are known to be sort of like watching over you. You're born under a particular mountain, that
Mm.
that is always forever the mountain that looks over you to an extent, right? You have a relationship, whether it's conscious or not, and that you come under some other mountains, right? And then there's a sense of the spirit of the mountain is still looking over you. And I think there's a must at least be a felt sense of this, like whether you're in, like, Mount Rainier in Olympia, Washington, or Seattle, right? Or Mount Hood, or, like, and actually I don't know the names of the Colorado mountains. What would be some of the names of the mountains in Colorado?
The one close to me is Pikes Peak.
Pikes Peak.
It's one of the 14,000 foot ones into stuff, and I don't know a lot of them for sure, other than just the range, the Rocky Mountain range.
Well, what about now let's be honest, like, so obviously this is Psychedelic Source. Um, what I suppose it wouldn't surprise you for me to ask a question about your relationship with psychedelics and plant medicines, if you feel comfortable talking about them. Yeah.
Yeah, none, zero, which is interesting too. Being a part of this and being still drawn to your show, your guests, you putting this together. Because yeah, there's been zero, zero interest, and I would say there's a little bit of interest the last few years, um, but no use at all.
Yeah, and I know I said this to you personally, but I've actually appreciated that because I feel, at least in terms of Psychedelic Source, to have a perspective of someone who doesn't have that kind of relationship with psychedelics or plant medicines, grounds the conversation in a particular way that that I can't provide. Basically, it's a perspective I can't
Mm.
provide. And for those of you who don't know, I mean, other than, of course, working with Jason on the creation, I mean, we even talked together on the name of the show and brainstorming and trying to get a sense of what my vision was, and we could talk a bit more about that. But just in terms of like my own accountability and transparency, right? That I actually really love the fact that you were the one editing and even choosing the clips, right? Because other than obviously having a nose for film and editing, but also for marketing, but also what you would be curious about and what you think would catch people's eye or interest as someone who already is from a perspective like I don't work with psychedelics. You like, you're open, in terms of the fact of the conversations and find value in it. What more could you say about, the process of working with me on this particular project?
Yeah, I really appreciated your openness with that. I think both from having me involved when I don't have that background and perspective. And I think there was both sides of that, right? Like obviously I'm sitting there going like, hey, I don't know this and this. So guide me here, as I push the boundaries maybe on, hey, I'd love to focus on business here or this kind of language here. And for you to give me that, like, well, folks in this world will shy away from this, and that, and just that back and forth, which I think was great because, and I think it's a good lesson for us both and maybe the listeners as well, that openness. Sometimes you're going to be involved with something, sure, that needs that industry knowledge and
Right.
expertise. But over and over again, I've seen when you can take the knowledge or maybe practice from another industry and apply it to yours that you're going after and nobody else is doing because, oh, this is how we do it. That can open up so many things. And I really appreciated that about you, that you were open to that. Hey, let's look here, let's look there, let's think about that. And really, it was just an easy way to work.
Yeah, no, absolutely, I couldn't
Honestly.
agree, but I will say also that you're very talented and you're easy to work with, right? I'll give
Well,
yourself
thank you.
more credit, on your own openness, and being because, like, I mentioned, some people wouldn't even consider my project,
Mm,
especially
maybe
if they're
so. Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I like to think that, like,
just
it's
the
amenable, but, like, uh,
maybe just the like just the taboo nature or something maybe of it, or
the taboo nature, because like,
yeah.
psychedelics aren't legal everywhere. Granted, this is a legal conversation, and actually maybe this would be an interesting thing for us to comment on briefly. Like right now, there's a lot of, communities, organizations, and businesses that, um, when a certain platform, I won't name them, went through and changed their algorithms, many of them got flagged, in the psychedelic space and had their content removed and blocked,
Mm,
right? And they were and I'm not talking about ones that were doing illegal actions. There were ones who were doing legal activity, and they got flagged by the systems and the algorithm. And it's certainly a concern for people in the psychedelic space about how do we approach media and marketing, given the fact that we use words that can sometimes be there could be good reasons for flagging it, but then it creates this barrier to education and content and access. So I'm curious from your media and marketing perspective and your background, with over 30 years in this industry, you know, what thoughts or reflections or even ideas could you give people who might be picking this up who are in the community about, what could help them in their media or their marketing, especially in this space?
Yeah, I think no matter what industry you're in, especially on the fringes like that, there's just a certain level where you have to just play in the sandbox of the LinkedIn's, the Facebooks, the Twitter, whatever platform that is. And as frustrating as I mean, I'm not in any kind of crazy fringe, you know, niche at all with what I do, and I'm still frustrated. I'm frustrated at their approach and how things can get, smashed down. It just doesn't make any sense. And so, in fact, our mutual friend, we have to give a shout out to Gary De Rodriguez, who
Hey,
introduced us.
Gary Rodriguez connected us. Hey, Gary.
Absolutely. And I bring him up because he's had to deal with that when running
Yeah.
ads to his, resolution technique, just to mention the word trauma, like just to say that word in its title, he can't run ad. Like it's just, there's just silly stuff that we have to navigate. And like it or not, like that's where we have to play. So how do we do that? Well, in Gary's instance, he renames his main, it's still the same solution he's providing. He renames it, right? He plays in that world a little bit, for a good lesson for anyone, no matter what niche. And we hear it over and over again, but we get lazy. Maybe we don't do it. Getting people into your own ecosystem as quickly as possible and as much as possible so that you are in as much control as you can be. And so you play in LinkedIn sandbox or Facebooks or whoever, but drive people into your school community, your newsletter, your email list, anything that you can, to then talk a little more openly. So maybe we talk symptoms, problems, pain points, general over in the sandboxes, and then we talk solutions on our own platforms. So those are just some kind of rules of thumb that,
Oh, I think that's really good advice. I think that's really good advice, and I think that's what a lot of people have understood. Like the only way to really assure that your messages get to your people is to be able to have them to be able to receive it directly from you.
yeah,
And that you can't rely on other people's sandboxes.
yeah, and to take in, because it's so easy for us to get frustrated. Um, but at the same time, there's always been some kind of gatekeeper. There's always been some barrier, whether it was a gatekeeper in the past or it was money. How do I mail these people some information or just access at all? So it's hard to do, just human nature, right? We get used to, hey, this thing, and then it gets taken away or it changes around. But it's nice to have that little reminder at times so that we can, um, okay, that's right. We're still better off than we were.
Yeah, no,
Let's get
that's true. Like
creative.
in
Let's
terms of
figure this out.
barriers to access, like it's way easier for people to share their own content and their own media on the platform. So you've done this work for over 30 years. And there's obviously been a lot of changes in how people communicate, and there is a lot less barriers to entry in terms of people entering in this medium, right? Like a lot of people don't have experiences. Like all that you need is like just pull out your phone, right, and you can record. What kind of other sort of like skills and mastery tips would you generally tell people in terms of like if they're trying to share their own social media or their own message online?
Yeah, I think just doing it more than anything. Like, don't think about it and just post, do, go. It's the only way you're going to get to that point that you're seeing everybody else at. That, oh man, they're killing it with whether it's number of followers or just quality of posts or videos or YouTube channels. And it's so easy to say, but there's no substitute for it. And it really is a great thing that it is so easy to do and to start, because we are humans and we're wired the way we are. There is a commoditization that has happened on the video side of things and all of that been happening for a while. But at the same time, when you talk about percentages of people who are actually doing it, it is tiny, 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 who actually start a podcast, a video podcast especially, and keep it going, or posting online at all on any of the social channels, on starting a YouTube channel. It's so minuscule, so tiny that you have this opportunity to stand out, especially from where I come from, the people I work with most of the time in this B2B space. They're in industries that, I mean, nobody's doing this, right? It feels like once you start down that road, it feels like everybody's got a podcast. Everybody's got, and
Yeah, no, I
so
definitely
few.
have that. I definitely have that edge. Like someone's like, "Oh, how many subscribers?" I'm like, I can't even track the subscribers in the normal way because like there's so many different platforms that the podcast is on, right? I'm like,
Yeah,
we've only done like I don't know what 16 episodes at this point in time of us talking, and I'm like, well, maybe there's like like 30, maybe like on YouTube or something like that. But I'm like I haven't even looked on the other platforms. Like there's like iHeartRadio, there's Apple Podcasts, that YouTube has its own and there's so many different choices now, even as someone who's a creator. To try and support
yeah,
the different communities of interest is a challenge in of itself.
yeah. It is, and that's also, I mean, one of the early, probably the first discussion that you and I had. I tell people all the time, like, my focus is on the show and that person you're across from. Like,
Yeah.
that's the win right
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
Everything else is gravy. Now, I, I'm not trying to pretend like, oh, I could get, 1 million followers if I wanted to, but I don't. No, I would love it. I want to crack that code. I want to have millions of people, you know, listening to my show every month, right? Of course, we all do, and we should. That's fine. But I want to make sure that there are wins all along the way, right? I want to make sure that the show that we construct, whether it's mine, whether it's a client's, is a win from episode 1, right?
I
Because
love that.
otherwise, if it's not supporting you, your business, or both in a financial way, in a network building way, in some way you see tangible results, you just won't stick with it. None of us will, right? Whether you're paying for it, whether you're doing everything yourself, you're investing either a ton of time or money and time. And if there aren't any results, if it's, you know, 3 months in and you're like, well, I mean, it's cool to be out there, I guess, that doesn't do anybody any good, right? So that, I mean, again, first discussion you and I had, that's what I kept pulling from you. It was like, what's going to make this show a win for you, both for your business? That's why we dug in. What are you really wanting to build business wise? And so let's make sure this show in some way supports that. For coaches I work with, a lot of times it's super easy, super simple. It's a direct, well, yeah, like we can bring on their ideal client, we can bring on strategic partners. If somebody hires them from those interactions, boom, easy. Sometimes it's not a clear, hey, I don't want to sell something from the show necessarily. So
Right.
there's maybe a step or two in between. There's all kinds of ways to do that. But in my opinion, those need to be there or you won't stick with it.
And I love that because, like, I feel like really in terms of like the source of the source here, really grounding it. First of all, and just that win-win-win mind, like everything should be a win, everything should be supportive, like, and I see that as like an ethical approach, right? That even from the beginning, whether we're talking about the first episode or in terms of the content, or is it supportive for you? Is it supportive for me? Is it actually creating a healthier ecosystem of relationship for everyone? I think, then regardless of a subscriber count and other things like that, it's serving you and it's serving your community and the interest of what you're trying to support, and everyone's supported by it. So I love
Yeah,
that.
and that's the thing that I know you and I have had this discussion as well, that I'm just baffled by people who on either side who feel like it needs to be these silos of
Right.
you're going to do business and make money, or you're going to do good in the world. And it's baffling to me that people even think in those terms when it's this. I mean,
That's right.
what does one have even to do with the other than they support each other? Like it's
It
you
should
can
never be a win-lose paradigm, people. And like, and that does, it's not even like work, like it's not even just not reciprocal. It's toxic for everyone. And that to have that mindset, it just harms everyone. And it's actually just not true. Right. No one is ever really separate from anyone else. And even if in your mindset you think, oh, this is business or this is that, um, it's not the reality of it. And I do have to say, like, from the beginning, like, we had a natural, connection in terms of relationship and talking and conversation. It was always easy. And for me, that's always a sign, that it's a supportive relationship and friendship, beyond, because I'll tell people, like, friendship first, everything else extra. And, um
well, and just to comment on that a little bit too, and
yeah,
it's
sure.
to call out also that it's okay if it's not
That's right.
there and you go your separate ways,
Yeah.
right? Because
Yeah.
I feel like you do, like, and I'm not in this sort of like, oh, kumbaya, and we all have to get along before
Come
we can
on,
do.
kumbaya,
No,
just
you
a
can
little
do
bit of
business,
kumbaya,
and
a little kumbaya.
yeah, I mean, but it's, but but as you go along, it's like, why wouldn't you want to work with folks who you enjoy working with,
That's
and
right.
there is just a connection and stuff, because you can. Anybody can do what they want. Like you can work with those folks who you don't connect with, but it's going to just be hard. It's just
Yeah,
gonna
like, why are you
be
making it
difficult.
harder on yourself? I mean, this is the thing, it's like, if it's not a good match, it's not a good match. Like, do you force yourself to date people who aren't a good match to you? I mean, like, maybe some people do, but I
Some
mean,
people
like
do. Yeah.
but, like, that's the same thing. It's just like, like, well, I'm like, it's like, maybe a better example would be like, okay, you're having the black licorice ice cream that you don't like when you could have just chosen the chocolate that you do like. Like, why would you, you know,
Exactly.
who's way like, the ice cream seller doesn't care what you're purchasing necessarily. Maybe they had a special on the black licorice. Not that there's anything bad with black licorice, people.
Yes,
But
there
this is
is.
the
It's
thing, like,
horrendous, and if you eat that, there's something wrong with you. Yes.
but but
I
but
will
but this
judge
is
you
this.
all day long.
But it's like, I mean, like, or finding the right therapist or finding the right psychedelic practitioner. Maybe I can slip this in here, right? That, like, when you find supportive relationships, everyone should be winning. It should be flourishing. It should be abundant, and should bring, ideally in my world, bringing up your energy, right? There should be a sense of we're both uplifted from the connection, and if you're bringing yourself down or one person down, like, it's not in service to everyone. You're making something that's a non-supportive system, and it doesn't mean that they couldn't be the perfect for someone else, right? It's just like, oh, we just, like, and we could even make it about politics or anything, religion. Like, it's like, well, maybe we're just not in alignment enough to be able to, or only to this extent, right? Like, we're alignment to this far, like having healthy boundaries, right? And But I just appreciated, and I'm grateful that this is one of those ones that just, like, was so natural, so easy. naturally supportive and creative, and it really felt like a partnership from the beginning and working with you and co-creating with you, but also that you had such a good, solid business and marketing fundamental grounding, but still with that artistic, creative sensibility. And regardless of whether you've worked with psychedelics, like I have that sense of feeling, uh, just enough kumbaya. Maybe it's the mountains, maybe it's Colorado infection, but Texas is fine. I know, but having that spirit of connection, of wanting supportive relationships, which I think is part of, for me at least, what I've really gotten out of relationship with psychedelics and plant medicines is a deeper connection to myself and to the world. And I felt like you already had that,
Mm,
you know?
thank you.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
But maybe I should ask you a question just to push you a little bit on the psychedelic edge. You are in Colorado. And as you may or may not know, now there's going to be more access to psychedelics and plant medicines in Colorado. Um, as someone who doesn't work with those substances, what are some of your general thoughts and feelings about it? Especially now that you've had more exposure to this community through this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I for the most part, I don't care, right? Like from,
Do what you
I
want.
mean,
You know, like I don't care.
yeah, I mean, and I mean that in the most amiable way, right? Like there's just no, I don't know, judgment or thought either way. It's just never been from. I mean, I've never drank, never done drugs, never have.
Yeah.
Never been of interest to me. Um, and at the same time, it's like, you know, do your thing, whatever. I am interested. I do as I've explored, just on the ayahuasca side of things and
Mhm.
those kind of vision and those, as I go deeper in my own, because I'm also, very, in the personal development world, um, very introspective, very like just love it. I mean, there's a reason coaches are my clients because those are my peeps, and I love it. Like digging in on the human side of things. And I think I am open to that. I think there is something interesting about going super deep, in a very guided way with, whether it's the ayahuasca kind of thing or something like that at some point. It's not a driving force for me, but I'm definitely open to that at some point.
And what about, and you also happen to be a parent. And as a parent myself, and something else we can bond on, let alone also having animals and things. um, like, does it raise concerns for you as a parent?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's in, um yes, always, of course, right? Like, there's sort of like a given there, but there's also, it's in combination with, are you, as you get older, are you exploring this, and how are you doing it, and all of that? And there's just going to be some of that, but are you handling your shit? Like, are you doing your stuff? Are you, you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
it,
Is
that,
it
that's
is
got to
it
go hand in hand.
is it a source for disconnection or connection, or is it a source of escape? And
Right,
back to, like, substance, I mean, it doesn't have to be a substance you're dependent on, but it could be, people can create dependencies towards anything,
right,
relationships, sex, all the things. Um and and I think as a parent, you just generally want your kids to continue to have that healthy relationship in their world, you know.
right.
And but I'm it sounds like you're just generally open and receptive and supportive. Like, if it was like a voting measure, would you vote for it? Like, to make it, like, let's say it was like, if like I know we're in Colorado, but, like, let's say we had a new federal law, you know, what would you be okay with legalizing psychedelics?
Probably. Like,
Yeah. Yeah, there's always
again, there's
conditions.
just,
There's lots of different kinds, right?
yeah, and yeah, you could probably detect it in me. It's more indifference than it
Yeah,
needs to
I
be
could
this
care
way
it
or that
either
way. Like,
way.
Yeah.
But I love that you're passionate with working with coaches, and it wasn't a fellow coach, who works with trauma. He doesn't work with psychedelics, right? That introduce us to one another, and in working relationship, and and I'm definitely going to be forever grateful for that. And I love that in some ways it was, healing and coaching and having the fact that your work had that work with coaches that also brought us into relationship. Do you want to speak a little bit more about like why coaches, why people who help with trauma and healing?
Um, the ripple effect that's everything. I don't get into this idea of legacy and
No,
I
no
can
legacy.
change the world
What
and
about
all of
generational
that's
wealth? Anything like that?
well, I mean, I just don't. I don't concern myself with all of that. But I will say there is something really powerful that draws me to working with coaches because of that ripple effect. I know that if I can get more eyeballs on what Gary does in this world, he's going to, whether he's working with an executive coach or a therapist to certify him in his methodology, those he works with people who touch hundreds and thousands of people's lives, right? And so it just if I can help him get that exposure to get his amazing work out in the world, oh my gosh, like that gives me chills talking about because that's that piece that I don't know, there's that feels good. And it's probably the same reason those are just my friends. Like those are just the people I hang out with, right? Or
But still,
I
I
don't
can
know.
hear the passion, like, literally the first word was coming out of your mouth was ripple, right? That ripple effect of knowing, like, in a positive ripple effect, right? Like, I am going to be
Mm,
a part of that positive change because I'm empowering them to make that change, and I can help to create more of a tidal wave effect than just a simple drop in the bucket, right? That's isolated, right? The media gets the voice out there. But what
yeah.
about you and your podcast? So maybe you could talk a little bit about like, your work, podcast to podcast here. What is your podcast about? People who might be interested in more about your work and what you do. Could you speak a little bit about, your podcast and your show?
Yeah, happy to. Strategy and action. So started that one a few years ago. And for the most part, I take my own medicine with it, right? So the way that I coach people to create a show and why and all of that is to build and grow their business. So bring on their ideal clients, bring on strategic partners. And that's what I often do with strategy and action. It's a show for coaches, consultants, interviewing coaches and consultants or people who serve that community. So it's a resource for them there. Um, and it, and that's really what I lead with a lot of times. This is going to go both. Hey, I'm going to talk about my show, but also some good insights for folks if you're interested in starting your own out there and to think about because well, for one thing, I take my own advice about half the time. So some
Well, this is
sometimes
half.
it's
That's better than you have better batting average than me right now.
yeah. So this is a do as I say, not as I
Notes
do.
I do.
But half the time, it's like, okay, let's bring on somebody who, yeah, maybe they have an audience of my ideal clients or things like that. A lot of times I was just like, ooh, I want to talk to that person.
Right, you're just
They're awesome.
excited. Like, I just want to hear what he has to like. I just want to talk
I
to
just
you. Can
want
we
to,
just talk?
yeah, I want to
Like,
connect
can we
and bring
record
them
it
on.
at the same time so I can share with other people?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And And that's the beauty because I always lead with that aspect of it that it's there to grow your business. Here's how you do. But just as important, right there with it, is it's the greatest networking tool you will ever have. It's the greatest cold outreach tool for sales, but also for growing and building your network because you're doing it in a way that's not weird and wacky. I mean, if you just called somebody up, was like, "Hey, man, I don't know you, but you want to talk for an hour?" I'm like,
You got
"No,
any
not
sweet
really. Who
tea
are
with
you?"
that?
Yeah, exactly. But if, "Hey, would you like to come be on my show?" Oh, heck yeah, right? I mean, that's just the default answer usually, and because you're giving right away. Like
Right.
I'm going to shine a spotlight on you. I'm going to do. I mean, I can't tell you the amount of times that this goes into like the lessons category, but the amount of times from the first show I ever did, Startup Dallas, back, we had a 3-camera shoot in our studios, interviewing folks, to my next show, the Jason Croft Show. Nice obnoxious title, right?
Yeah.
We're Seinfeld style. We were
clearly narcissistic. We need to do
yeah,
something. Do
exactly.
we need an intervention?
Yeah. And I had that show, Seinfeld styles, driving entrepreneurs around and recording that. It's so much fun. But so many times during that, I'm interviewing some multimillionaire, crazy successful person, CEO, whoever it was. And in my head, I'm just like, they know this is just a little YouTube show, right? And that was the lesson, though, too, is that it didn't matter.
It didn't matter, yeah.
Yeah, it was a chance for them to tell their story.
Right.
And then the content being created, when it's good and it's of quality, well, it lets them take it and go put it in front of their audience. Even
Right.
if you don't have a big audience, they
That's
can put it
right.
in front of their audience, and it's a validating piece. And so back to specifically strategy and action, too, another lesson for everyone that I had to learn is the show, yes, who it's for, and have coaches, consultants on, and we talk through a bunch of stuff, but each episode is constructed around a core topic, so that it's not just me sitting there like I did in the early days and going, "Oh, cool, tell me more. What'd you do then? And then what did you do?" Because that's just easy and natural to do. I'm interested in this person. I want to find out more. But there was a mistake in that to not have, there's a higher, like this, to be peers in this
Right.
conversation. And it's really
Right.
important to do and to create that. And so the show itself is constructed around a core topic, obviously, that relates to that guest, but it's the two of us digging into this topic instead of just all about it. And for the guest, their background, their expertise, all of that is going to come through. We make sure to hit all of that. So, but very long-winded answer about
No, but I think that's
that
I think that's
show,
a
but
perfect answer. I think that's a perfect answer, and I appreciate that you took the time to give some advice for people too. And actually on that, a lot of people now are both concerned and also interested in working with AI. For video and media and marketing and like part of the concerns come up with like, okay, am I going to lose my job type of thing where like, am I going to be replaced with an AI version of me or my voice or like, I'm not going to control that anymore. But also like a curiosity about like, how do I work with AI in a way that's actually supportive? And maybe this gives us an opportunity to even talk about how AI is used in this podcast.
Mhm.
But what kind of thoughts or reflections could you have about AI and media and marketing?
Yeah, and I love it. I'm deep in
Deep.
the
How
AI
deep? How deep?
world. I mean, constantly using. Actually, before this episode, before we started recording, I'm looking over here on this monitor, but I'm in the middle of a coaching session with AI from this project in Claude that I've gone through and built out to pull some stuff out of me to get through. It's just so much easier to say it out loud and talk and go back and forth and consider and all of that. It's phenomenal. Just like with anything, the hype has been there from the beginning of, oh, just videos edit themselves now, and throw in a clip, throw in an hour-long thing, and you've got 100 promo clips. Yeah, you do, and they're dog crap. Like they're still horrible, right? So, and at the same time, the the same tool that people are saying, hey, go do that. Well, I use it for a very narrow. It does, Opus clips, for instance, right? I use that software that people say, oh, just throw in your stuff, and it's still horrible. I test all this stuff constantly. It's still horrible, but eventually it'll get there. I have no doubt. I have no doubt that in another year, it's going to be like, oh wow, I actually created some great clips out of that. Right now, it's still doing horrible, but the transcription, the subtitles it creates, the ease, like all this stuff is so great. for your show, I mean, the show notes, the titles, the LinkedIn post, it's so good at, I feed it your voice, I feed it for the LinkedIn post. I use a certain bot for creating the description, and okay, that's cool. What about a YouTube specific title? Let's get into that's just great. One thing that I found early on as well, it wasn't just the ease of, oh, a LinkedIn post can get kicked out about this episode now. It was that it was different. It was that it wasn't me using the same 3 freaking words I always use.
Right, because you on hang-ups, like, you're like, "Oh, I'll use however a lot and run on sentences," or whatever. It's at least mixing it up a lot more and pulling from other mediums and ideas and stuff.
Oh, yeah. And it is, it's so funny because it's interesting. I mean, as the voices get there, as the AI clones get there, it's really interesting. I think there's a place for all of it. And as all of it gets even better, wow, what an opportunity when you are the one that is really you. You're really connecting with that other like you have a community now, you have in-person events. Like, it just makes all of that even more valuable.
That's right.
I'm just always an optimist when it comes to this stuff, and I know it's a big disrupting force, and I do that. Yeah. And so how do we
But
write it? How do we do it well?
I love that you mentioned, like, we use it for transcription, we use it to help leverage, for your video editing or, like, for other or for titles and things like that to help generate ideas. And I mean, the transcription is transcription, but but even so, it makes it more accessible and provides more content that we probably would have been able to provide, by either one of us doing it manually,
Oh,
right?
yeah. Big time.
Yeah, and that's
And
some of the
it
heavy
just
lifting.
it would not be as good,
It would not be as
period.
good. It
I
would not
mean,
be as good.
the details, the things it pulls out for your show notes and then remembers, like, "Oh, that's right," because I mean, I remember when I used to type up the summary for my episodes, and then, we talked about that, like, it didn't even scratch the surface of how many, "Oh, here's the framework they talked about and put together and did that,"
Here are the
like,
key takeaways. Here are the main points. Yeah, and it just does it. It just churns it out, and it's just like, wow, right?
oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap up, I'm usually in the show, I do like to ask people about what sort of sourcing or piece of advice you would give someone in the psychedelic community. And we've already kind of actually tapped on some of those conversation topics, but maybe there's something else that you would maybe want to share with our listeners, since you of all people whose journey with the podcast the most. I'm not going to say you're my number one fan because you're like I have to be paid to do that, but
Doesn't mean I'm not.
doesn't mean you're
Doesn't mean I'm
not.
not.
Doesn't mean you're not. But like,
Yeah.
I mean, like you probably have the most exposure to the content of this show. And maybe even like, as someone who's not in the psychedelic space, what have you learned? Like, has it actually helped you to be better sourced? Or do you feel like there's other piece of advice that you would tell people as someone who is not into psychedelics or is neutral about psychedelics?
Uh, I think for me, my biggest takeaway with it is, eh, the same way I'm fascinated with people and their stories, I've really enjoyed the understanding this world,
Mm,
right? And I think you've done a phenomenal job. I know that was really intentional on your part on who you've had on covering different corners
yeah,
and
thank you.
representing different aspects of it.
Yes.
And that's been a blast to have a front row seat to that and understand this world really well, compared to other folks who haven't ventured in at all. And I think it's interesting, aspects of it that, I hadn't thought of. And certainly with your specialty and ethics side of it, that just wouldn't have crossed my mind, right? That I feel I feel really empowered, honestly, to guide somebody to the right person now in this world who's interested or maybe concerned. Hey, if they mentioned in casual conversation, I'm thinking of this, like, well, you should think about that I never would have before. And I think you've done an amazing job at that, at not just the interviews themselves, but the purposefulness of who you brought on to interview.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that. And that actually is really meaningful to me to know that you feel like you have received some extra insights and sourcing and ideas and value, real value. Like speaking of ripples, I just can't thank you enough for all your heart labor and working with me on this show and even from its inception and the idea of calling it Psychedelic Source and stuff when we were ideating and he's the one really responsible for the images that you see. I mean, granted, we talked through them and we picked through them and stuff together, but it's worth saying that like you're just you're part of the heart and soul of Psychedelic Source, and I can't imagine not having you on here. So thank you,
Thank you so
Jason.
much.
Yeah. Thank you for joining me on Psychedelic Source. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and share with others in our community. And if you're a psychedelic practitioner, therapist, or coach looking to identify blind spots in your practice or determine next steps for moving it forward, take the first step by visiting psychedelicsourcepodcast.com. Until next time, remember, start low, go slow, and stay connected to your source.